They're starting a show today with the former vice president. Go, former vice president. Tell us why you should never be anywhere in a Republican primary or primary of any kind. Take a listen.
Of the indictment, I want the American people to know that I had no right to overturn the election. And then on that day, President Trump asked me to put him over the Constitution. But I chose the Constitution, and I always will. And I really do believe that anyone who puts themselves over the Constitution should never be president of the United States. And anyone who asks someone else to put themselves over the Constitution should never be president of the United States again.
There you go. I don't know who thought of that. Everyone who puts themselves above the Constitution should never be president. And everybody who asks someone else shouldn't be president again. Nice little radio blip there from the former vice president, who, by the way, he got cratered when Tucker had that thing a couple weeks ago, whenever it was, and I've heard this from you before, Tucker. God, but what a loser. I'm sorry to say that, because I actually had, that was the last straw. I have a long fuse, but when I blow, I blow. That's ridiculous. That is absurd. This is not a joke, Mr. Vice President. On the very day, right, that another nail is in the coffin of this republic, that man goes out there and delivers a catchphrase. Not to mention, because you listened to the Great American Mail yesterday, and you do a lot more than that, you heard Peter Navarro yesterday on the show talk about the Green Bay sweep, right? And well, it was Steve Bannon, but that, they were talking about the plan. The plan was not to have the vice president overturn an election. It was not to have the vice president decide which votes to count. It was, at its core, a challenge to the states over fraud, and they were going to have objections, and they were hoping to have days of coverage. You heard Navarro talk about it. They weren't getting any coverage. Nobody was talking about the fraud. We're going to talk about that. We talked about it yesterday a little bit. Unfortunately, listen, folks, I'm largely controlled by the news of the day, and the news of the day is still Trump. But I want to go over a bunch of other things I didn't get a chance to cover yesterday, bring you up to speed, and then we are going to cover a couple of other stories. Well, I got one on the economy coming in the can, and I got one on this Biden crime regime too. So anyway, but folks, to the extent Pence was still in the race, he's toast. I don't know why he's wasting his time. I mean, there's no lane for him. We're going to cover a little bit of the GOP race as well later. But I just wanted you to know that part of what this January 6th nonsense and this Trump nonsense is designed to do, okay, let us not forget, okay, part of the reason it is going on is because we are no longer a constitutional republic. We are a banana republic. It is what it is. I don't like it any more than you do, but that's just the facts. You can't fix it till you accept reality and go forward. Part of the reason I renamed my Substack a few months ago to The Last Days of the Republic is because that's what it is. We're living in 1930s Germany. A lot of people don't know it yet. Pence is one of them. He still thinks. Anyway, there's a lot of reasons not to like Pence. But anyway, we're not. I mean, somebody tweeted around this morning something about Michael Steele. Oh, my God. The Republicans are so desirous of having a black person, so afraid of the racism charge, the racism hoax, that they put this idiot Michael Steele as their chairperson at one point. Now, of course, after he grifted them out of a few $1 million, now he's on MSNBC and other places grifting people out of millions of dollars, working the race hoax and others as the former GOP. There's a whole ecosystem for people that will go and criticize the GOP. Notice there's almost none on the other side. Tells you that there's a problem here, that you're being hoaxed, and you are. But anyway, so he was out there saying, because Tim Scott went out and said, there's two systems of justice, there's two, and there's one for them and one. No, there's not, folks. There's not. There's not two forms of justice out there. There's no justice right now. None. Zip, zilch. Right? It's a joke. I mean, think about the old famous saying from Roman days. Don't quote laws to men with swords. Do you think somebody just sat around at a bar and they're all drinking and they just thought that up? You know what would be funny? This is a good saying. Or do you think maybe they were trying to do something and the law says you can't do it, and somebody with a sword said, that's your defense against my sword? Oh, yeah, okay, exactly. It's just like people talk about the Constitution. Oh, that's outdated. It doesn't make any sense anymore. It was written by a bunch of slaveholders from hundreds of years ago, right? As if the Constitution was something that Jim Madison and Thomas Jefferson, right, and Sam Adams were all sitting in a bar having beers, right? And they, hey, I got an idea. What about we have an amendment that says that these 5 freedoms will never be infringed? Really, what are the freedoms? What, religion, the press, assembly? Oh, Wow, that's crazy. How'd you come up with I think of things. And what about if the government cannot keep you from having arms? What if you can have anything the government can have, a cannon, a rifle, you can have? Well, man, you're on fire tonight. How did you think? I don't know. I've had it in a dream, Or do you think option B, that's exactly what the king was doing to them? And they go, like, when we fascist this government, everything they did to oppress us ain't going to happen. Jimmy, you writing this down? Good, because he's good. He's good. He throws this down, right? Right? That's what happened. And it's the same thing here. You can see it right before your eyes, what's going on. Right? And people are not reacting to it appropriately because they're in the hoax. But anyway, all this stuff is pretty straightforward if you can look past it. So getting back to the Trump indictment, what else is going on? Well, there's a lot out there in the Twittersphere, right? Or the Exosphere, whatever the heck it is called now, I don't care. But there's a lot out there. We got to televise this trial. Now, anybody lawyer will tell you this, folks. Any lawyer will tell you. The feds don't televise. They don't. Now, I've told you before, but until recently, the Northern District, which is where I'm broadcasting from right now, even attorneys couldn't bring devices that had cameras. Now, we've got an exception now. They'll give you what's called a blue card. Yet there's a lot to get to it, and if you lose it, you ain't getting another one. But they will let us now, finally. But civilians, folks that aren't attorneys, and even attorneys who aren't admitted to you got to be admitted to the Northern District, right? Which is a hard thing to do even if you're an attorney. Y'all can't bring them either, all right? So everybody just knows it. They don't televise things. But of course, the left wants this televised. Now, you know why they want it televised, right? They want it televised because it's all part of the hoax. It's all a big joke. That's what it is. And it's not a joke in the sense of ha, 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 but it's a joke in the sense of the government now is all just one big television production. So I don't really understand how Morning Joe became a thing, but he did, whatever, him and Mika. So we're going to go to them in a minute. But just remember what this is all about. First and foremost, it's about persecuting your political opponents. Secondly, it's about rigging the 2024 elections. Very obvious here, okay? Because they think Trump is beatable. They think he's more beatable if he's in jail or being prosecuted. It's all to raise money, right? It's also to interfere with the election in the sense that there's stories out there. You're going to hear them if you hadn't heard them already yet, but that's why you're listening here. Trump's out of money. And Trump is spending tons of money on legal fees. Out of money and legal fees. You really want to run that person up the flagpole, right? Yeah, of course. That's more election interference. They're not idiots. I mean, folks, he may beat the rap, but he's not going to beat the system. They just understand this. Remember what they did to Michael Flynn? Just imagine yourself. Imagine you're driving to work one day. You don't know anything about anything. Just living your life. You're completely innocent. And they pull you out of the car, say, you've been charged with child molestation. What? What? When? Oh, you know when. Hands behind your back. Freedom of rights. The whole bit. And you beat the rap. Right? 6 months later, they got the wrong person. This completely wasn't you. You weren't even there. It's such a bad case that it doesn't even go to a jury trial. The judge throws it out, says, you don't have these charges. I've heard you have no evidence to hold this person. How much money have you spent? You have any idea? Right? You ever hear about the rainy day fund? It's raining. A couple $100,000. How you get your reputation back? Aren't you that person that was accused? Right? You think the average person sits and goes, oh, well, I happen to follow this very closely. And in fact, they had the wrong person and the judge. No, none of that works. And that's if the open and shut case. This one, ain't no judge throwing this out, folks. All right? So they know what they're doing. It also raises money for them. It also feeds their rabid base. Their base wants this. They're the ones that set it up. They didn't make the cut for the show today, but on the cutting room floor today, I had something about one of these morons from the January 6th committee talking about we laid the groundwork. Right? Actually, it was Adam Schiff, that moron. Yeah, that's who it was. And he's absolutely right. I mean, again, they lied in the January 6th committee. Let me just tell you one lie. I mentioned it yesterday, and somebody wrote me and said, what lie did they do? Here, I'll give you a good one. It's on Rumble. It's not on YouTube. I need to figure out how to get it put out because it doesn't violate the rules. But I did one show. Okay, this was back when it wasn't a podcast. It wasn't a daily, all the news. It was when I was doing a lot of specific podcasts about specific things. And I had one because I'd covered the January 6th committee, and I did about a 5 or 10 minute video. Again, you can still find it on Rumble. Just Google 187 in my feed on Rumble. You'll find it. Anyway, here's what they did. They came up with this thing, and they said for 187 minutes, Trump did nothing. Nothing. And again, from the very beginning, they were lying. I knew they were lying because there's big ways they lied. They lied a lot of subtle other ways, but here are the two big ones. One, they started the moment he finished his speech. That's when you start the stopwatch. And then they ended with his speech in the Rose Garden. Right? Now, if you do that, it's 187 minutes. But you can't start the stopwatch when he finishes the speech because the last thing he says is to go peacefully and patriotically. Right? So you can't really start him reacting obviously, oh, my phone's ringing. I fixed it, folks. I told you I was going to fix it. I'm not going to tell you I did, but I did. I can see it, but it's going to go to voicemail. Don't worry. I'll call them back. I've already returned 2 phone calls already this morning. All right. So you obviously start, unless you're an imbecile, with the Capitol breach, right? Now, that doesn't happen until about 45 minutes, an hour or so after his speech. So right there, 187 is a lie. What's the other lie? He tweeted twice, right? He tweeted twice, hey, stay peaceful. He then tweeted, and we're going to go over that, by the way. Don't worry, I'm going to walk you through that in a minute because that's one of the points I'm going to make about Jack Smith. And then he tweeted again about another 20 minutes later. Why did he tweet that? One, because the last person that wanted violence on that day was Trump. You now know why, because he had a whole plan. He had the Green Bay sweep, remember? How are they going to do the Green Bay sweep with people coming in on them, right? They didn't want that. They wanted peace so they could dominate the news cycle. What's going down at the Capitol? Well, there appear to be a lot of objections to 7 states, and they're in debating. They've been debating for 2 hours, Arizona. Apparently up next is Wisconsin, and they're going to debate. And then in the next day, what's going on? Well, they're still debating something about the election and fraud. I don't know. Who knows how they would have covered it, but that's what they wanted. They wanted the 6th, the 7th, the 8th, the 9th, the 10th. Tension up there. What's going on? Focus on this fraud. Did we really elect the right person? That was the plan. We're going to go over how Pence is lying about Trump didn't want him to choose the Constitution. Everything that they're talking about is in the Constitution. How can I ask you to choose between me and the Constitution when what I'm telling you to do is literally in the 12th freaking amendment? Read it right there, Pence. And stop lying about it. Anyway, that was a lie. 187 minutes was a lie. Ask yourself this question. Why, January 6th committee, would you lie? If it's such an open and shut case, if it's so simple, if it's so horrific, if it's so bad, why do you need to lie? And they lied repeatedly. Anyway, that became an article later. But I want you to understand how bad this was. I put that thing up. Within hours, YouTube took it down and gave me a strike, which is why I ultimately stopped broadcasting until I started rebroadcasting this second podcast, Reburn. I now am doing on YouTube because they changed the policy. What was violative is no longer violative. But here's what you understand. They were mad at me for producing a video proving that the January 6th committee lied about 187 minutes. And they don't tell you why. They're fascist. They just say, hey, we took it down because you violated the rules. What rule? Where? Where in the video does it do it? Well, I don't know. We don't have to. We don't tell you. Anyway, now it doesn't. And I want you to understand that, just so we'll move on that point, I can't remember if I used the Washington Compost or the New York Crimes, but I used one of the two, okay? And I literally, that was the whole video, 10-minute videos. Look, here's the timeline from the frickin' Times. I can't remember which one I used. The one I used is still good. The Times has, since I did that video, folks, I'm not joking, go to Rumble, you can watch it yourself. They've altered it to get rid of that stuff because they were used to prove that the January 6th committee was lying. But anyway, I digress. Coming back to this, part of the reason we know it's a joke, now we're going to go through that. Well, I already broke it down for you legally yesterday. Today, I'm going to come out of legalism, and we're just going to use history and common sense. What's going on here? Well, let's listen to what Mika and Joe have to say, and they're going to bring on one of these former Obama prosecutors who now is nothing more than a rabid partisan hack, and obviously so. And while I keep saying this, folks, if you're listening, if Glenn Kirshner prosecuted you, oh my God, you might want to go back and look at those and see if there's some corruption, because this person is not a stable person. Anyway, let's listen to Mika, Joe, and Glenn Kirshner.
NBC News legal analyst Glenn Kirshner.
Thank
you so much, Glenn, and I greatly appreciate your insights on cameras in the courtroom.
Yeah.
I think, again, I've never been a massive fan of cameras in the courtroom, but here, when you have the most important criminal case in American history, and you have a president that depends, of an ex-president that depends on conspiracy theories, isn't transparency what we must demand of our federal court system?
All right, now, folks, the premise is a joke. It's just a joke. I mean, first off, everything he just said, there's a lie. It's not a very important case. It's nothing but a show trial. But again, cases, federal. Is there any discussion here? What's the policy? Why does the federal government? Why does the court system not do that? And let me tell you just a simple answer why they don't do it. Because they know where it leads. It leads to a circus. It leads to turning a process where we get to the truth. Right? One side gets to speak, another side gets to speak. The prosecution, because they get first, they get the last word if they want it, and they always do, believe me. Same way in civil. Plaintiff goes first, defendant goes second. Plaintiff gets the last word if they want it, which they always do if you got any sense. Okay? And we don't allow hearsay. We don't allow extraneous evidence. We have a motion practice. It is It is a very good process to getting to the truth. And in courtrooms, you still largely can get to the truth. Not always, but you got a better chance than this media crap that we have out here. They've always known that. That's why they don't want cameras. It's a very simple answer to what's going on here. In other words, no, we're not going to turn this into what you've turned the quote-unquote news into. But let's let them go ahead and see if they can make the case. So they say, well, yeah, normally we don't allow it in there because we want the process to be very streamlined to get to the truth and focused, and we don't want a lot of extraneous circus crap going on. But let's hear their exception here. Let's hear what the great exception should be from Glenn Kirshner.
Yeah, Joe, I think cameras in the courtroom are a must, because if we don't have them, what are we going to get? A one-sided account coming from Trump's lawyers. You're not going to get anything from Jack Smith and his federal prosecutors. And frankly...
All right, now, folks, again, a child could do this, honestly. We just heard from Jack Smith yesterday. So, I mean, he literally said that with a straight face. Two people. Now, it's MSNBC, so they look, hive mind. If we don't do it, then Trump will be one-sided and he'll tell lies, right? Jack Smith can come out and give a press conference, so can Trump. Not to mention, it's not that as though no one's going to be present, right? If you're dumb enough to believe that no one's going to be present and only Trump is going to be able to talk about it, that might make some sense to you. But obviously, since you know that Jack Smith can come out and talk about it, and he will, and we're going to get to Jack Smith. Don't worry, a lot of stuff to tell you about that. But anyway, and we also know that there'll be people there, you just can't have cameras. There'll be people there, you just can't have cameras. So what will those people do? Well, NBC, ABC, all the alphabet networks, right? The New York Crimes, the Washington Post, they'll all be there. They'll have reporters, and they'll come right out, and they'll tell you what happened. And you know what? I'm pretty sure they're not going to be mouthpieces for Donald J. Trump. Pretty sure. Now, again, folks, I'm not going to listen to any more of that because it's just outright idiocy, right? I mean, literally, if I was an NBC person, I literally would never listen to him again. That's it. This person comes on. They want the circus. That's all it is. It's all that is. It's a circus, and they can't even come up with a good reason for it. All right. So let's switch back to Jack Smith. And again, let's go through the indictment using our common sense. Don't need a lot of legalisms here. Here's Michael Beschloss, and just highlight him here if you're on. By the way, two things, a quick programming note. I've got to go to St. Louis tomorrow for an investiture of a friend that I practice law with right out of law school. And so I will be on a plane. I probably will not broadcast tomorrow. If I get up early enough and I can do a 10 or 15 minute one, I may. But in all likelihood, if you tune in and the podcast hasn't dropped, you don't see me on YouTube or Rumble, no show. I'll be back Monday. Number two, I forgot what number two was. I'll come back to it. Anyway, all right. So Michael Beschloss, official account, Presidents of War, 9 other books, NBC's presidential historian, PBS contributor, blah, 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 blah. He's one of these people who is a cancer on the body politic. He is cancerous. Right? What's so bad about it is he purports to be above the fray and reasonable, right? And people believe it, and he has all these high posts, and he's nothing more than a clown. And he doesn't care. He doesn't care how much damage he's doing to the system at all, right? So here he goes, right? Co-conspirator number 6, where are you? Car 54, if you ever saw it, the famous Herman Munster, I can't remember his name now, but he played one of the greatest judges ever in My Cousin Vinny. But anyway, whatever. So see how it's a joke to them? Oh, this is so serious. This is the most serious case in United States history. And then they joke about it, right? What does that tell you? Well, it tells you everything. But here's what he's talking about there, all right? And I may have mentioned this yesterday, but I want to highlight this as part of the thing that Jack Smith's going to do, because a lot of people have pointed this out in other contexts. For example, Devon Archer, who we're going to get to. Devon Archer testified behind closed doors in Congress, right? And he gave some bombshell testimony that continues to prove how corrupt the Biden regime is, right? And do you know what? Well, quinky dinky of all coincidences, right? The very next day, Jack Smith drops his indictment. Huh, that's strange. And then some people went back and said, that's funny. Remember when Hunter Biden's sweet deal, where buried in another part in a paragraph, in another thing, that he had blanket immunity for all future crimes? If even a Republican Department of Justice takes over, that got blown up, and it was in the news cycle and then you know what happened? Jack Smith, he amended the Mar-a-Lago indictment. And you know what? Come to think of it, the Mar-a-Lago indictment dropped when some other big news that was bad for the Biden administration. It's almost as if Jack Smith thinks his job is to drop indictments and or amend indictments, which is perfectly within his right to do, right? When he files, there's no deadline here. That there was nothing that forced him to do it on those days. But I'm sure it's just a coincidence. And I'm sure Jack Smith, he would never do anything to make it a joke. So co-conspirators, there's 6 of them. Donald Trump, we know about him, but the others, they aren't named. Now, if you read the indictment, and folks, I have read the indictment by now. If you want to, by the way, here's a tip. Go to podcast if you want to read the indictment. Make it real easy for you. Go to Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcast and put in prosecuting Donald Trump. I'm not kidding you. I'm not joking. Andrew Weissman, and I think it's Mary, one of the other former prosecutor people like Kirshner. They literally have a podcast. Again, I told you it's content creation about Trump. Anyway, yesterday, I believe, they dropped the indictment. They'll read the entire thing to you, and you can listen to it while you're doing your walk or washing your dishes or whatever you want. All right, and I have done that. I did that yesterday. I listened to it twice. Very simple, and I've read through most of it. Here, we're going to pull it up on the cloud. 6 people are unnamed. Now, he can name them whenever he wants. Very simple, right? He just files an amendment, right? And then it pop, number 1. Now, what that allows him to do, if he were, say, not a person of good faith, would be like, well, is something bad out there for the Biden administration or Democrats generally? Go name co-conspirator number 1. File it. And what do you think? The media will immediately, like a lapdog, boom, whatever, they'll drop whatever they're talking about. Oh, co-conspirator 1 has been named. Number 2, number 3. Now that you know it, you can't unsee it. This is not a serious person. If this were a serious person and the president were serious and they tried that crap once, you leaked once to the media. What do you mean? What do you mean the transcript of Trump waving the secrets over there? What do you mean it leaked? How did it leak? Who's the leaker? I don't know. I mean, I could run a really tight ship, but I mean, the internet nowadays, I mean, people can just press a button and send, I don't have no idea. All right, well, you get an idea. If it happens again, you're all fired, right? Or blah, 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 blah. Happens one. It happens daily. They pull this crap. Nobody cares. Everybody wants the show. All right. So I read through the indictment, and this jumped out at me, okay? It was like a snake. It would have bit me. I couldn't believe I was listening to what I was listening to when they was reading the indictment. So I went, and as you know, I pulled the indictment, and here's paragraph number 114. Now, here's why this is important and why it jumped out at me. 1, because I just have a gift. I'm a very skeptical person, and when I read things, my brain always, whatever it is, the defendant repeatedly, my brain goes, okay, wait a minute. You said repeatedly, so I want to hear it. It refused. Okay, it's refused. It just does. So things jump out at me normally. But this one jumps out at me for even more reasons. 1, because I told you, I did a podcast for 10 minutes. YouTube took it down, right? Still up on Rumble. And I covered this very story, that Trump wanted peace. I've done an article about that. I think there's also a video. Number 2, he even tweeted at the time, be peaceful. Now, again, the January 6th committee ignores this in their quest to get to 187, because if you measure from when the violence started to when this happens, Trump tried to quell the violence within 10 minutes, and he tried to do it again within 30 minutes. He didn't want the violence. He knew, oh my God, my whole plan's blown up. I got 7 states challenging. I got Ted Cruz, oh my God, he's not going to go through with any objections, right? He knew what was going to happen. Right, his whole plan was done. That was it. That was when it was like, okay, well, now we're done. We tried the lawsuits. They told us to screw off. We tried to challenge the certification. That's all been blown up. Well, I guess I'm going to have to transfer powers. Nothing I can do at this point. All right, and I'm going to read it to you. So first I'm going to read the tweets. I can't remember when the Capitol was breached. It was around 2:15-ish or something. I could have pulled it up, but just take my word for it. Trump tweets this within 10 minutes or so. Please support our Capitol Police and law enforcement. They are truly on the side of our country. Stay peaceful, exclamation point. He doesn't want the violence. He knows the objections have started. He's been told. He knows that. He doesn't want the violence. You are attacking, folks, you are unwittingly, I don't know why they're doing this. We don't know if it's a false flag. We don't know if it's a feds. We don't know. Nobody knows. Only God knows. All right. But we don't know. But we know he wants peace because, hey, I got my whole plan, guys. My whole plan. Remember the 6th, the 7th, the 8th, the 9th, the 10th. They're going to be covering this. Got a plan. Don't mess it up. All right. Later at 3:13, I am asking for everyone at the U.S. Capitol to remain peaceful. No violence, exclamation point. Remember, we are the party of law and order. Respect the law and our great men and women in blue. Thank you, exclamation point. Now, that's what happened. That's the fact, behind it. Now, I don't know what happened, but that exactly what happened, right? In other words, you could argue theoretically that he's just doing this, but really he wants the violence. But since you know the backstory, you know that it's consistent with what he wanted, right? And you can always argue. I got no problem with the January 6th committee arguing this, and they did. He should have done more. Nobody knows what more is, but you could argue that. But I want you to listen to the way Jack Smith tells the story. And now you start to get an idea of just how bad it is, right? I've told it's the old Richard Pryor joke. You see your you see your husband crawling out of his mistress's window, and he comes over and says, who are you going to believe, me or your lying eyes? This is exactly that right in front of your face. All right. The defendant repeatedly refused to approve a message directing rioters to leave the Capitol, as urged by his most senior advisors, including the White House counsel, a deputy White House counsel, chief of staff, a deputy chief of staff, and a senior advisor. Now, that all is sort of true. Okay, that what he's saying there is he did say, I'm not going to do this, because they were asking for a more formal statement from the White House or whatever. Okay, that's what they were asking for. That's a different issue. Okay, instead, the defendant issued 2 tweets that did not ask rioters to leave the Capitol, but instead falsely suggested that the crowd at the Capitol was being peaceful. What? Huh? I mean, the first one is arguable, right? What later became the Rose Garden speech is what they were talking about, right? But he tweeted independently. These have nothing to do with each other, A. But he didn't do anything of the sort. What are you talking about, Jack Smith? He didn't try to make it sound like it was being peaceful. And again, this is all because Smith is not a person of good faith. And this is all part of their belief. See, they can't keep these things straight in their head because it's not based on rational thought and logic. It's based on emotion and rage. Therefore, it somehow makes some sense in their mind. See, Trump is both caused the violence and wanted the violence, right? But also had this deep plot. Now, Smith is prosecuting him for the deep plot, right? I'm prosecuting you for following the law. You followed the law to challenge certification. That is breaking the law, right? That's what he's doing. Well, the problem with that is, well, then Trump didn't want any violence. But in their minds, they can't let it go. But anyway, there's others, and I've given you some, so you have an idea what's going on there. But there's others in here I might talk about in the coming weeks or months, and who knows, we'll see. But I just want you to know this is not honest. And those are some basic ideas of why it's not honest. Now, I couldn't get this on video, but I want you to understand, what have I told you? I've been telling you now for weeks since I've been back. Part of what's going on, this is all, always remember, at the end of the day, this is all part of their plot to get rid of the Constitution. They detest the Constitution. They wake up every day and they literally have, it's like a fish called Wanda, the expert played by Kevin Kline, who, would get up in the morning and then would shoot a target to make sure his aim was still good. They get up every morning and they have a target for the truth, and they have a target for the Constitution, and they're right there. They're political opponents. They have a target for that. Every day, everything they do is to bring down the Constitution, right? And I've told you the reason they've been attacking the Supreme Court is myriad, but one of the main reasons they're attacking the Supreme Court is it is one of the few branches that still is going to come back and say, yeah, Jack Smith, this is a stupid law. This law does not mean what you say it means. If it means what you say it means, then it's void for vagueness and it's overly broad. So it can't mean that, right? And then all the other defenses, the First Amendment defenses, et cetera, right? Now, when the Supreme Court does that, what do you think is going to happen? Well, here's what I want you to understand, and let's get back to the wascally Republicans who always seem to be behind the 8 ball. Part of what's going on here is they want to divide the Republican Party. Right? They do. Now, they got Pence out there attacking Trump and attacking him basically. I've already told you why he's done it basically, but they benefit from that. Right now, you got a broken GOP. How do you think you're going to win the 2024 election when you got a lot of your party fighting against yourself? Man, that just, again, heads they win, tails we lose. Well, here's Ben Shapiro theory. He said this yesterday, and I was at the gym, I think, and I almost fell off my Stairmaster, but here's Ben Shapiro. Now, listen to this theory. See, Ben Shapiro, he still thinks that we're a republic. He still thinks that there's the rule of law. He still thinks that there's something called truth. Anyway, listen to his theory.
Put that aside. One of the things that's going to happen here, and you can see it happening, is let's say that this indictment goes forward. Let's say the judge lets it go forward. Let's say that the jury convicts. It will go to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court will look at these charges. And the Supreme Court is very likely to say, by a 5-4 vote, that these charges are spurious, and it is likely to overturn them. That's exactly what happened to Jack Smith's case against, for example, the former Virginia Governor Bob McDonnell.
That was not
enough.
enough.
That was a spurious case. Got thrown out. It's quite possible this case gets thrown. Now, imagine the political fallout from a Supreme Court on which 3 United States justices were appointed by President Trump, throwing out a case in which Donald Trump was convicted of conspiring to overturn an election. Can you imagine what the political fallout's going to be?
Yeah, Ben, wake up, Ben. Of course I can imagine. And of course that's part of what they're doing. Wake up, Ben. These aren't good people. They will literally pop champagne when that happens because it will be another nail in the coffin of the Supreme Court, which is a branch of government that's supposed to be independent. Remember, if you read the indictment, I could have pulled it up if I thought about it. I just made this connection. He talks in the indictment about the courts being the independent arbiters of whether elections are fraudulent. And he's lying through his teeth. But whenever it's convenient for Jack Smith, courts are independent. But when they're not and they rule against you, why, of course that's part of what's going on here, Shapiro. Good God. I mean, no wonder we're losing when we got people like that. And listen, I like Ben Shapiro as far as it goes. But on a lot of this Trump stuff, if you're listening to him, you are behind the eight ball. He has not even mentioned the Article 2 problems with what's going on with the boxes hoax. He doesn't even mention these attacks on the Supreme Court and the way that they should be framed. I mean, he literally, maybe he's just making too much money. I don't know. And he's a smart guy, but he is not a creative thinker, and he cannot see that far ahead to see, how far on the toilet we are. No clue at all. Anyway, so here's Jonathan Turley, a Democrat. Don't let anybody tell you anything. He's a Democrat. He still votes Democrat, too, I guarantee you. But anyway, here's him talking to Sean Hannity. And again, folks, there's a reason they took Tucker out. Okay, now, even though I'm no Tucker fan, don't have anything against him. He just wasn't the type of person I would normally listen to. But, at least Tucker gets it. Hannity, Jonathan Turley, anyway, take a listen.
Working overtime. I've been watching you all day, Professor, but I think you had a little bit of a break here to give you some breathing room and maybe a little bit more time to consolidate your thoughts on all this. You were great on the fly all afternoon. Let's get your overall take of this indictment and compare it to what we learned yesterday.
Well, this is a free speech killing indictment. There's no way around it. As you know, I write a great deal as an academic in the free speech area, and I've rarely seen a more chilling filing by the Department of Justice. I mean, the question that people have to ask themselves is, when is the price too high? I mean, people...
Okay, that's what I wanted you to hear. When is the price too high? I mean, good God, right? To sell your soul for the whole of the world would profit you none, but for whales, right? The idea from Sir Thomas More that if you're going to sell your soul, you should get more than whales for it, right? Okay, yeah, Jonathan, wake up. Dude, there's no price too high. These people are just looting the sinking ship as it's going down, and they think they're going to get on another ship and they're going to go do whatever. These people, there's no price that's too high. This is all part of what they want to happen. But you still have people out there like, oh my God, do they understand the free speech implications of this? Well, if you can't change an election, I mean, folks, let me just give you a theory here again, just to say it as clearly as it can be said. They rigged the 2020 election. Okay. Then, after they rigged it, if you have the nerve to try and go check out how they rigged it, they're going to put you in jail, right? That's the short of it, right? And folks, don't believe me, right? This election hasn't been audited once. He won by 7 million votes. He won by 3.5%, supposedly. Now, I don't believe that, right? But even with all the rigging they did, they still only barely pulled it off. Only then, right? Now people are looking. Right? This is very obvious what they're doing. And just so you understand, people that tell you, well, election fraud or election denier, well, it's not happening. There's a little case down there. One of the persons I try to listen to daily is Michael Berry out of Houston. He's one of the best commentators out there. He's as good as I am. His show is a little bit more folksy, so you might not like it, but that kind of stuff I kind of enjoy. Anyway, he talks about what's going on in Houston. Houston had an election last November. Okay, Harris County, where he lives, basically Houston, if you've ever been to Houston, nice town. All right, long story short, since we all know what happens on Election Day now, Republicans, 80% of them vote on Election Day, Democrats, only 10% vote on Election Day. So you don't have to be a genius to go, if you're sitting there and you're an election official and you're a Democrat, like, wonder what would happen if we had some problems like bad weather. Well, we can't control the weather. Well, what if they don't have ballots? And what if there are lines, right? If 80% are going to vote, well, geez, what if we cut 10, 15%? Because, there are lines, they don't have ballots, it's just screw this, I'll go to another place, there's a bunch of confusion. Well, it turns out, what do you know? What a coincidence. What a coincidence. On Election Day in Houston and Harris County, they ran out of ballots. What? And then they went back and they said, well, how in the world did you run out of ballots? Law says you're supposed to have 125% of the number that showed up last time. Why'd you have less? Well, we don't know why we had less, but we did. And we requested them, and we didn't get them. And blah, 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 blah. Now, it's almost a year later. People are filing lawsuits. Trials are going forward. And the election officials, they're refusing to turn over data. They're fighting it all the way up to the Supreme Court. Now, what does that tell you, folks? You don't have to be a genius to know that's cheating. And again, some of these elections that were won by like 1,000 votes in a city of 8 million people, right? 1,000 votes here or there. You think 1,000 people don't leave if there's a line? Because how long? Well, something about ballots. I don't know. I can't cast a ballot. When are they going to ballot? I don't know. Maybe an hour, maybe two. Think a few people left? Huh? Would you leave? I can tell you I would, right? I mean, anyway, whatever. When they started with this early voting crap and they started all this stuff, you saw it coming if you were looking. If you could see the stitches on the fastball, as the great one would say, right? You know where this is going to lead. We don't vote anymore, right? It should be election day, and there should be maybe one early voting period or two or something to make it so if you got a problem then, and then if you're in the hospital or something, you're serving in a foreign war, you should be able to do an absentee, right? The basic system. When you have 60 days of quote-unquote voting, you ain't voting. You're gathering ballots, and that's what they're doing. And listen, folks, every little point gives them a couple to all they need. I've told you this before. They got 33, 35%. We're going to get that in a minute in the can. How do we build that other 6, 7, 8, 9%? A little cheat here, a little cheat there, right? Next thing you know, bingo, bango. We ain't a middle-class nation like we were in the 80s when Reagan's going to get 60%. You can't cheat then. Ain't going to do enough, right? We're different. Anyway, all right, here's Scott Adams, and this is going to be the last, I hope. See, okay, I had Ben Shapiro there. I'm not going to cover him. I've already covered it. I just want to make sure I didn't forget it, and I didn't. All right, so here's one more person. Again, I'm not being critical of Scott Adams. I like him. He also has a podcast I occasionally listen to. Interesting guy. He's the Dilbert guy. He's now in politics. I like Scott as far as it goes, but again, these people, they don't know where they are. Have no idea. Scott Adams won't even read 1984. He won't even read Animal Farm. He won't even read The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. If you don't read these books, if you don't read Darkness at Noon, if you don't read The Road to Serfdom, you don't understand the leftist brain. If you don't understand the leftist brain, you are clueless. All right, so here's his tweet. I think this came out this morning. The most entertaining, and therefore the most likely outcome of the Trump indictments would be putting the American election process on trial and showing the country we don't have a reliable system for knowing who won any election, and any is emphasized. Folks, of course, but again, what's the problem here? You still think we have a rule of law, Scott. You think we still have rational people that care about the truth. Of course. If we were a rational republic, what we would have done is we would have sampled votes from all the questionable counties. Very simple. Fulton, Cobb, some in Michigan, some in. You don't have to do a huge one. You just go get a bunch of the ballots and get about 10,000 in each of these questionable jurisdictions. You get a Republican in the room, you get a Democrat in the room, a communist, anybody who wants to come, and then we have independent experts do it in front of everybody on camera, and you go through the ballots, you take the election, verify the signature. It's very simple. Right? And if I'd won by 7 million votes and 3.5%, I would have ordered that as the president. Come in and say, look, there's a question. I don't want a question. I want to govern. Do exactly that. And then if we start to see impurities, then we can expand it. Well, it's a lot of you've got 1,000, 15% or 10% or whatever, 2% of the vote here is bad. You got signature that don't match. A person here says they didn't vote, and here's a vote from this person, yada, yada, yada. All this crap. You do that. Then there wouldn't be a question. Now, why are they refusing to do it? Now, what they'll tell you is, well, we don't have to do it. We don't have to do it. It's all a bunch of crazy conspiracy theories, right? That's what they're saying. But the fact of the matter is, the system's never been set up to check on cheating. We've now been aware of the problems that we might have. We should check it, right? And believe me, the story I told you about the people in Houston, you think they're coming forward and going, well, we're so sorry it happened, but we're innocent. No, they're calling you election deniers. You're an election denier if all the Republicans ran out of paper and they couldn't vote. That you're an election denier to think that anybody would possibly cheat, right? Anyway, all right. How hard would it be to convince one or more jurors in an election, quote, might be rigged? I could convince all 12 in 5 minutes, and I wouldn't need any charts or data to do it. Okay, I'm going to stop listening. I read the whole tweet. I'm going to read a little bit more, but folks, stop listening. Just move on. Smile at him. Looking forward to the next Dilbert cartoon. I still will listen to you. You might have some intelligent things to say on other things. You don't know what you're dealing with. You're not going to convince these people. You're not going to get one of them, Scott. I don't think I could go into a jury in D.C. and win a trial on one of these January 6th papers. And I'm one of the best trial lawyers I've ever seen. And yes, I did say that, and I mean it. And I mean, I can get a jury to do, usually because I got the truth on my side. But some people, you just can't reach them. At best, you'd go in there not trying to convince them of anything. Frankly, the best way you'd probably be able to go, and I'm just thinking this, I didn't think I was going to do this, but I'm doing it off the top of my head. I'd probably go in there and be like, he's old. I mean, they're talking about 20 years here just for one charge. They got 30 charges there. I mean, it's 30 times 600 years. Come on, he's old. I mean, that best I'd have. I wouldn't even begin to try the case on the quote unquote facts. Right. So let's hear Scott Adams thinks he's going to do it. Don't believe me? I'll demonstrate. Fact. Any system with a lot of participants, complexity, high stakes will become corrupt over time. That is true of every observed human-made system since the beginning of recorded history. The only mystery is when the corruption happens. For example, we know Congress is influenced by military-industrial complex, and we know the financial markets are increasingly rigged for the big players. Every human-made system of high value, okay, they're asleep, Scott. And no, they're not going to look. You're going to finish and they're going to wake back up after you finished and go, election denier. That's it. He has no idea what he's facing, and therefore he's nowhere near to getting it out. All right, folks, I'll finish up with this on the Trump thing, and I just did 40 minutes on sort of the history and popular culture view of the Trump situation, and I'll leave you with this, folks, and I hate to say this, but people are saying it, and it is true. The people that are saying it get it. The indictment is 45 pages. The indictment is 45 pages. I'll remind you, what was Trump? What number president was he? Folks, if you think that's a coincidence, it's not. It's, anyway. All right, we're done with that. All right, moving on. Jonathan Turley, again, Democrat, now kicked out of the herd because he dared to defend the rule of law when they had Trump associated with it. The Devon Archer transcript is out. Archer said the Ukrainians wanted Hunter Biden to help relieve pressure from the prosecutor looking into corruption. All right, so just understand that this is now a person who has independently corroborated what is obvious to everyone. Hunter Biden gets a job on the Burisma board, getting $80,000 a month. Who's in charge of the aid and making sure they get aid? His father. Why do you think he got on the board? Okay, all right, that's corruption enough. I'm already doing an investigation. I don't need to hear anymore. I can't believe the vice president would actually let that happen, but whatever. Okay, so it turns out they need help to get the prosecutor off of him. Remember, that's the prosecutor we've played several times. Son of a bitch. They fired him, and they put in somebody that was good, right? That's how it happened. They wanted the Bidens to take the heat off. Biden later insisted on firing the prosecutor. All right, so Archer is independently corroborating that which Biden has bragged about, okay? There was a discussion of $142,000 purchase of a luxury car for Hunter as his payments, as well as wire transfers. Archer said the Biden brand was Joe Biden, and that was what was being sold. It is very, very clear we're not looking for Hunter. Burisma owner, I can't pronounce the name, something Russian, reportedly said that Hunter was stupid and his dog was smarter. Archer told Congress Burisma would have gone out of business without securing the Biden backing. Point is, they've released the transcript. All right, they had closed-door testimony. The transcript has come out. There's Jonathan Turley, an independent Democrat, basically going, there's a lot of fire here, right? I did that. I didn't say smoke. There's a lot of fire. There's a lot of smoke, too, and all you need is smoke to do an investigation. But just to show you how things work, here's Philip Bump. Never heard of him in my entire life, but he's a Washington Post national columnist. Okay, the Washington Post. The just-released transcript of Devon Archer testimony just completely eviscerates what Comer and Jordan were saying on TV. Totally embarrassing. Now, folks, how bad is your media environment when the leading newspaper literally will tell you, yeah, you just saw me crawling out of the window. Yep, that is my mystery. Yep. Who are you going to believe, me or your lying eyes? Your eyes are lying to you. I'm going with that excuse. All right, folks, I don't know what to tell you. Anyway, obviously he's corrupt, and you don't need to hear anymore. It's like a few years ago on the at the club where I'm a member, the nominating chairman nominated his son to be on the board. And, I'm not saying his son wasn't the most qualified person. I don't know. But what I laughed at was when they announced it. And then what they do is you go up in the locker room, the men's locker room, they have an announcement of whatever. And so he was the chairman of the nominating process, and he said, here's who we nominated. And then he stuck in a paragraph below because his son had been nominated. And I chuckled at this. I still do to this day. And it said, just a note, when they had a discussion of my son being nominated, I left the room. I left the room. Now, folks, really? I mean, why don't you just take my nose and rub it in it like a dog? Really? I mean, come on, folks. But anyway, that's what it is. All right. If Republicans are winning, there's a new poll out here from I don't know who. But anyway, I just want you to understand this. Because if you want to understand where we are and why we are, one of the things you have to think about is who is this created? Who is this for? Well, what the Democrats are doing right now, it's for their base, right? And now, it's not so much for the black base, which there's some problem there. And next week, we'll probably be talking. Oh, I know what I was going to say. Oh, I did. I did tease you. I probably won't be here tomorrow because I'm on a plane. All right. Who is it designed to, right? Well, increasingly, the Democrat Party's voter base is overwhelmingly young people, right? Young, especially educated people, because they're about as dumb as a brick. Number two, ethnic minorities, right? Although Trump's cutting into that quite a bit. And then number three, well, what is number three? All right, here's what number three is, okay? And then increasingly, this is the group that they're broadcasting to, this number three that I'm about to tell you about. Increasingly, the message, and the problem they've got is the message is okay for number one, which is the young, educated people who are stupid. The minorities, there's a little tension there. Trump's starting to pick up. They're starting to turn Republican in increasing numbers, right, which is going to be a problem for the Biden crime regime. But anyway, this third group, here we go. All right, and this is a tweet from, looks, I've never heard of him, Con Carroll anyway, basically laying out what the article is going to say. If Republicans are winning married men by 20 points, if they're winning married women by 14 points, you remember the Democrats party women, right? Not married women, okay, and unmarried men by 7 points, then who is keeping the Democrats competitive? Who is overwhelmingly Democrat? Single women are single-handedly saving the Democrat Party. Now, here's the reason I want to talk. A couple things I want to tell you about that. One, if you're married, you're a lot more likely to be Republican. Why is that? Because you're a lot more likely to have a family. And if you have a family, you're a lot more likely to want prosperity that is offered by a capitalist, free market, constitutional republic, right? It's just that simple. If you're single and you don't care about the family as much, then you're a lot more likely to gravitate to the type of government that Democrats are offered. But single women want it most. And single women, all this stuff, start thinking about all the news and things they're doing, right? And think about the single women especially the ones that are gonna believe all this stuff. And when you start seeing Joe Scarborough, you think they want that trial televised? You think they want Trump prosecuted for the mean? Well, I mean, say mean tweets. So what? So he's an a-hole. Who cares? Live and let live. Oh, no. Oh, no. There'll be no live and let live. You'll stand 6 feet away and you'll wear that damn mask. That's what you'll do. All right. Just throw that out there. It's true. Here's J.P. Morgan Chase. Says Biden economy is, quote, best the world has ever seen. In an interview out today, Jamie Dimon said, this is the most prosperous nation on the planet. We have the best economy the world has ever seen, the most innovation. The credit is sound. It should be the highest rated credit in the world. Why are they talking about that? Well, you may have heard yesterday in all the Trump nonsense that our credit rating was downgraded. Because we have the highest credit in the world, right? We're the tallest of the midgets. But our credit rating was downgraded. Now, I wonder why our credit rating was downgraded. Could it be that maybe the economy's not so good? Could it be the fact that our debt now exceeds our gross domestic product, which has only ever happened like during World War I and World War II, right? Wonder why, if that was what it was, right? Maybe that's why they downgraded us. And here's Jamie Dimon, right? Do you think he cares about what the truth is? Why, not only should we not have been downgraded, I don't know why they downgraded us. I don't know why this is reality, this truth thing, why it's the best economy in the world, right? Sound familiar? Anyway, folks, not good. All right, finishing up here, last story of the day, and you're going to be all caught up in 50 minutes. I'm sitting right at 47, so I'm going to be able to do it. Here's the state of the GOP race, folks. You got people like Pence and Chris Christie. They're a joke. I don't even know why they're running. Seriously. I mean, they really should take the money and put it to use somewhere else. But Vivek Ramaswamy is increasingly on Ron DeSantis' heels, and he may overtake him. Now, just tell you real quick, a lot of people that are saying DeSantis is toast and DeSantis is going to lose, they're lying to you, folks. We don't know. Iowa and all that stuff is 6 months away. We don't know what's going to happen. A ton of things can happen. And I know the polls say this and the polls say that. It doesn't matter till you go to this. Till you go and you vote. Nobody knows what's going to happen. If you put a gun to my head and said who's going to win, I'd probably say Trump. Largely because of the famous thing about the primaries. It's one of the most famous ways to handicap the primaries is Republicans want to fall in line and Democrats want to fall in love. So it's true. And falling in line would be, hey, he's the president. And until he says he doesn't want to do it, it's his turn. That's just the way it is. And I think all else being equal, Trump wins just with that. And all else is unfortunately not equal. DeSantis has had some problems, et cetera, et cetera. But we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know. All right. And it's a long race. It takes a long time to get to the necessary delegates you have to give to get him. So we don't know. All that being said, the best campaign that is being run right now, by far, and better than Trump, in terms of all the trappings and what's being said, is Vivek Ramaswamy. And so you need to hear from him, and here he is talking about what he's going to do if elected. Take a listen.
Which brings me to the first arm of the administrative state that I have committed in my administration. We will not just reform. Reform is a false promise. I don't think the people who make that promise believe it's false. I think they're good people who fundamentally think it's true. Mostly Republicans are the ones you'll hear it from. We're going to reform a government bureaucracy. We're going to reform the administrative state. We're going to reform the FBI. I believe that's a false promise because it cannot be done. I stand not on the side of reform. I stand on the side of the American Revolution. And that is why today I am announcing formally our plan not to reform the FBI, but to actually shut it down.
All right, anyway, he goes on to talk about apparently there's approximately 35,000 people that work in the FBI, and he's going to get rid of the 44% that are, he's going to keep the 44% that are actual agents, and the 55% that are just bureaucracy, they're gone day one. And then he talks about he's going to shift the 44% that are actual agents to doing different things. Anyway, I wanted you to hear that because here's the basic point here, folks. He gets it. There's no reform in this crap. I mean, it's too far gone. You can't reform the Washington Compost. You can't reform the New York Times, right? It's got to be completely gutted from the inside and rebooted, right? And that's just the problem you have. Anyway, so folks, I just wanted you to hear from him. He's by far running the best campaign, but it is early, so don't get in over your skis about that. It's going to be a long time before we know who's going to win. So anyway, you are now all caught up with the news of the day. Remember, I probably won't be broadcasting tomorrow. If you try to download the podcast or come to YouTube or Rumble, and I'm not there early, I won't be there. So, and I'll catch you on Monday. Anyway, if you enjoyed this podcast, I hope you tune back in tomorrow.